Panel joining us now, Rebecca Berg, national political reporter with Real Clear Politics, and Elizabeth Harrington, staff writer with the Washington Free Beacon. So it's been quite a week for the Hillary camp. This is the video, a portion of the video, Rebecca, that they released just overnight. This is their new argument. It's one of the new arguments that the government is incompetent. You know, there's all these different agencies. They're labeling things differently all the time. There's a very easy explanation for all this. What do you think of the video and that argument as it stands?
Well, it doesn't surprise me that they are making this argument, but there are a couple of things that do surprise me about this. One, that they waited this long to push back on this controversy. I mean, this has been percolating for months. We have been getting new revelations every week on this email controversy for months, and I think a lot of Democrats are puzzled about this too. Why did it take the Clinton camp so long until Bernie Sanders is beating her in the polls in New Hampshire, until her trustworthy numbers are underwater, to finally try to push back on this? But I think what voters are going to be asking in terms of this response is, where does the buck stop in the State Department? Does it stop with the Secretary of State, or is she just a cog in the wheel of a big bureaucratic entity that is, you know, disorganized and where the policy is unclear? And I think that's going to be the question moving forward. A
lot of great points made by Rebecca. Elizabeth, how do you see it?
I see it the same way, and I think it's important to note that Hillary Clinton going into this was supposed to be the most qualified, this stateswoman, shoo-in for the nomination, and then now she's complaining that, oh, the classified rules were too hard to follow, that she didn't know how to do it. I mean, that's a bad argument, and I think it's indicative of really they don't have a good answer for this. They don't have a good answer of why she set up the first Secretary of State to set up a server in her own home, and it's looking, you know, like she may have violated, you know, criminal national security laws. I mean, the scandal is just getting worse and worse by the week. This is the second week in a row that the Washington Post has said she had the worst week in Washington. It's not looking good for her.
You know what, though, Rebecca, we did have a Democratic strategist on with us earlier this week that says, listen, Hillary Clinton is not guilty of doing anything illegal. And to his point, the judge ruling yesterday, yes, she did violate policy. Yes, he was citing a law, a 1950s law, that is about protecting records, that you're responsible to protect records as a public official. But it hasn't crossed over to that point yet. She isn't guilty of a crime yet. Does that matter at this point? Or do you think there is already damage being done?
Well, there's certainly already damage being done. And as we think about, you know, whether this is potentially criminal, not a criminal investigation, you can see that Republicans are being very careful when they're talking about this to say that no, there is no proof that Hillary Clinton has done anything illegal at this point. But it is a question of trust, really, a question of was she not fully transparent? Was she not following the policies of the State Department, perhaps to cover up her own activity? And so these are the questions that politically are really going to matter for her, because that's what voters are going to be looking at.
Asking these questions, Elizabeth, but again, it comes back to, will it really matter when we get close to the time of electing the president? The Washington Post did a deeper dive into these new poll numbers from Quinnipiac this week that looked into honesty and trustworthiness. And yes, Clinton scored the lowest out of any candidate in these swing states, Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Donald Trump came close, but not as low as her. You compare her to the Republicans, you have these Republicans like Jeb Bush that are getting the majority of voters saying, yes, they are trustworthy in these swing states. But we say trustworthiness matters. Does it really? Is that really going to be the factor in deciding the next president?
I mean, I think it is an important factor, also coupled with the likability. I mean, what this really harkens back to, the average voter is not going to know the ins and outs of all this classified information, the email scandal, but they do know that it's very reminiscent of the way the Clintons ran the White House in the 90s, and that they were scandal-ridden. The trustworthiness gap is a problem for her, but she doesn't have the personality that her husband had to make her likable to voters. I think likability is more important, but coupled with this, they don't trust her, they don't really like her, you know. It's not a good sign for her. If this is not the one poll that can make a difference, it's not looking good for her, though. She doesn't have the likability to really bridge the gap.
That is one of the big questions going into the fall. What is something that she can do, a policy she can present, something that she can do for voters to bridge that gap? Because regardless of this controversy or others, that still is an issue she's going to have to confront. Rebecca and Elizabeth, great to have you.